It's a real pleasure for me today to have Susan Messina. She's the Deputy Director at Iona Senior Services in Washington, D.C., which is a locally based nonprofit. As an out lesbian, she secured funding for and co-facilitated LGBTQ aging-related workshops and serves as the co-chair of the LGBTQ Aging Services Network, as well as many other LGBTQ-related outreach programs. And I'm so pleased to have her today because we are going to focus on the LGBTQ community and their issues with aging and having a full life and what their problems are that they may have to overcome. So thank you so much for being my guest today, Susan. I really appreciate it.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's start, because I don't know how many of our listeners are gay versus straight. Let's define, if you would, the acronym LGBTQ. What does that acronym stand for?
Sure. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and the Q can mean queer, which is a term that younger people have taken back. It used to be a slur, taken back and being used with pride. Sometimes it's also used for questioning, maybe someone who isn't quite sure of their sexual orientation. So it's quite an alphabet soup, but we try to use it to be very inclusive of everyone's experience with same-gender attraction.
Interesting. I'm glad you defined that for everyone. So we're trying to educate as well as find out the other issues that people in the LGBTQ community are facing. So could you talk a little bit about what some of the specific challenges are that are faced by LGBTQ older adults? Why are they more likely to be aging alone?
Sure. There's some new research on this. There's lots of anecdotal conversation. It's a rich area that people are very concerned about these days. So based on sort of my knowledge and reading of that, I'll say that some of the issues are childlessness and low marriage rates. So, people who are 40, 30, 40, 50 probably getting married at a much higher rate than someone who is now 75, 80, 90, who really experienced living through times of great oppression here in America where they could not get married. And certainly having children was very hard. And so many people rely on their children or their partners to deal with aging. Obviously, that community is just going to have less. There's another issue I'd like to tell you about, which is possible estrangement from family of origin. Many of our older seniors or our older LGBTQ community members lived through times where being gay was so wrong and they were literally shunned from their families. Many moved to the coasts or moved to cities, and many of them haven't had contact with family in decades.
Yeah, it's very sad, but it's true.
Exactly. There are other issues. Social isolation is one. If you are gay or lesbian, you may or may not have made deep friendships. Many did. Many have had huge, important communities of chosen family. That's a term that we use. But for other folks, who are more quiet, introverted, or shy, or just didn't make those friends, it's not easy to make friends when you get older, and certainly not easy to find folks with your same orientation potentially. And then there's just the things that happen in life. People get older and their friends move away or they pass away. I would be remiss in not mentioning the HIV and AIDS epidemic, which took, as we know, thousands and thousands of lives, cut them short. I have one client here at Iona who talks all the time about how he lost 100 friends to the epidemic. He's virtually the only survivor. So he's made new friends, but he has virtually no friends that he's known for more than 10 or 15 years.
It's very sad, yes. Mm-hmm. Very sad. And I imagine they face more discrimination with healthcare and caregiver issues. Is that true? Or
yeah, there's a huge worry about that. I don't know if I've seen empiric evidence that it happens all the time. I've certainly heard anecdotal evidence that it happens. I don't know if we have the research to back up, but it's irrelevant whether there's research to back up. The fear is there, and the fear is real, and the fear keeps people from reaching out for the help and services they might need. So we definitely know that people are concerned about access to health care. It's a big issue, whether or not they can be out and open about who they are, whether or not they'll get good quality health care. Those issues are compounded for trans individuals whose bodies may not match their presentation and have to deal with doctors who may or may not understand that. That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, they
for you, Debbie.
can't check the box, and I'm very willing to discuss that because I think it's important to educate the public about these issues. And there's so much that that happens that it's very difficult to cover it all in 30 minutes. That's for sure. But I know you had said that there's a report that said the three biggest concerns of aging LGBTQ adults are finding adequate support systems and the quality of the long-term care facility services and access to those specific older adult services. And
that's
what does Iona Senior Services provide that people would be interested in knowing about, and can they find those types of services in other places in the country?
Okay, that's a multi-part question, so come back if I don't answer it all. I'll start by just wanting to highlight, absolutely, people are very worried about where they can age. If they have to leave their homes, which of course virtually nobody wants to do, but if people do decide they need to move, are they going to move to a facility that is accepting and kind and will they be discriminated against? Will they even if the staff is friendly, will the other residents accept them? Will they have to go back in the closet? That's a term we use a lot, recloseting.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I have gay friends who say, well, I really don't know if I want to go there because first thing they'll ask me is, well, how many children do you have? And do you have grandchildren? And they don't relate to that. And so it makes it very difficult. It's a sensitive topic.
That's exactly right. Even staying in your home, I'll pause there for a second, even if you want to and can stay in your home and can afford the home health aides you might need, many of the home health aides, certainly where I live in Washington, D.C., wonderful, mostly women who are immigrants, many of whom do not come from countries where being LGBTQ is accepted, and in some cases where it's not even legal. People have deep concerns about bringing people into their home who might not be understanding or accepting of their gay paraphernalia, their rainbow flag, their partner's photograph, all kinds of things. So it's a huge issue. In terms of finding out whether or not a facility in your area is LGBTQ competent, is that the question? Is the second half of the question, Debbie?
Well, yeah. If someone listening today doesn't live in Washington, D.C., because our broadcast does go further out along the East Coast and some areas of the West Coast. I just wanted to know if you could make a suggestion to them as to how they could locate services in their area. I'm sure they may already know if there are some, but it'd be good to let the word out more.
Yeah, I wish there were, I could just say, go to www.blank.com and find out the answers. I have to give a couple of other resources because there is no one place to find out where good LGBT competent services are. But one place to start would be with the local area agency on aging. Mm-hmm. There's a federally funded website called the Elder Care Locator, which you may have talked about in other podcasts. So you can Google Elder Care Locator or phone it at 1-800-677-1116. That's 1-800-677-1116. That's the Elder Care Locator. Whether they have a handle on LGBTQ resources, I do not know, but at the very least, you could start with the list of facilities in your area and then start phoning them. And honestly, I think some of that due diligence is just calling up and saying, I am a gay or lesbian person. I am thinking of moving into or buying into whatever your facility. Talk to me about how culturally competent you are. And if the answer is, I don't know, that's a bad answer. And if they have an answer, that's the beginning of some hope and help on that. Another place. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, you go ahead. I'm just agreeing with you 100%. I think this is so great.
Good. So then another place to look for LGBTQ specific resources is trying the National Resource Center on LGBT Aging, which is run by SAGE, which is a national organization looking at older LGBTQ issues. According to my sources here, it's not completely comprehensive, but it's a good starting point. So that's the National Resource Center on LGBT Aging. There's no Q in that one. Some LGBTQ community centers or local SAGE chapters also have their own local resource list. So I would say if anyone is wanting to be a friend or an advocate to the community, a thing to do would be start making some phone calls and doing some Googling just in your local area and seeing what you can find. Chances are, at least in every major city, there's going to be at least one CCRC or one nursing home, one long-term care facility that is taking the lead on wanting to reach this community and therefore has done some training and has done some publicity around that.
And wouldn't, if they have friends who have already made the decision to move, for example, into a care facility, the word would spread that way as well, just by personal referral. Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Word of mouth would be something to really rely on because, there's another point I want to make. Any organization can slap a rainbow flag on a flyer or their front door, and that does not mean the staff has had any training or that the residents have had any, not so much training, but have the residents understood that they're living in a place that welcomes everybody. So you really want to dig around and ask hard questions, and asking it of residents who currently live there is probably the best way to get the info.
Yeah, this is very true. Just so that our audience listeners understand, is SAGE an acronym? And if so, what does it stand for?
I think it was an acronym, and I honestly can't remember what it stands for. So SAGE, all caps. And
so
I'm sorry, I can't give more.
They can Google it, and that will
absolutely.
I just want to make sure people know how to get the information. But how are these challenges compounded by race and economic situation? Like some people are poor, some people are very wealthy, some people fall in the middle.
Absolutely. Well, on the racial issue, I want to highlight this really good report that AARP put out just this March. It's called Maintaining Dignity, Understanding and Responding to the Challenges Facing Older LGBT Americans. So that's AARP, wonderful survey put out by their research shop, asks a whole bunch of questions, but around the Black and Latino concerns in particular. It seems that you can't separate out concern about healthcare discrimination in particular due to their sexual orientation or gender identity from their concerns about discrimination based on their race. It's a double whammy. So the research says Black LGBT adults aged 45 and over are equally likely to worry about each of these aspects, both for their race and their sexual orientation. Altogether, aging as an LGBT person of color is more likely to carry reasons for concern compared to their white counterparts. So, race in America and ethnicity very complicated, and showing up in this study as something that is equally as concerning as sexual orientation and gender expression.
Interesting. Well, is there a variation that exists among lesbians, gay men, bi people, and trans people in terms of their challenges and fears of aging? Does each segment have their own particular concerns, or are some things?
Yeah. Some things I can highlight. It sounds like, again, from this research study, that they call the trans community the gender expansive community, right? So folks who don't fit into a gender binary, that they really do face unique challenges and increased fear of discrimination as they get older. And this also is fascinating. According to this study, while many large cities have gender equality laws around gender identity equality laws to help protect people, most transgender people do not live in big cities. So there's this idea that's, the cities are all liberal and where all the interesting people would go. And in fact, our trans friends are around the country, and we're a big rural country too.
Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is interesting. One more interesting thing about the differences. Lesbians tend to be living with a partner or married at much higher rates than gay men. So gay men tend to be more, or maybe more, isolated than lesbian women, which is not a complete surprise when you think about how women sort of tend to affiliate and make friendships, and men have more of a challenge with that sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, very much so. Well, what kinds of questions should LGBTQ older adults ask relating to housing, as far as if they have to have a caregiver come in, or they're seeking a retirement community or long-term care facility? Should they have a list prepared of specific items that they need to have addressed, as well as generic questions about the place?
Yeah, great question. So I think some of those questions would be just starting big. Do you have a non-discrimination statement?